to pause and resume setInterval in JavaScript. So I started off with a bit of boilerplate HTML here, title and a link. Inside the link we've got a link to Bootstrap. That's just to make the buttons and everything look a little bit nicer. The styling padding 20 pixels just to pull it away from the edges. Inside the body we've got 3 elements. We have the timer and 2 buttons. The first button is to pause. You can see it's disabled here. We'll run through that in a second. And the second button is to restart and start the script. The timer is actually just a visual representation of what the setInterval is doing. So underneath here, I've created a script tag with 5 different variables in. The first 3 are just referencing the document elements above. Document.element by ID, we've got timer, pause, and restarts. That's just we can access those inside of our functions below. The var interval is actually how often the setInterval runs, and the output is the number which is going to be injected into the timer script above here. So I've created 2 functions, one to pause the timer and one to start the timer. The pause timer has these 2 Boolean values in here, and these are going to do. These are going to disable and enable the buttons as we go. So obviously when we pause the timer, we no longer want the pause button to be accessible, but we do want the restart button to be accessible and clickable. Inside here we clear the interval, and that's referencing the timer variable we set to the setInterval function down here. Inside the start timer function, we've just flipped around these Boolean values here, so the restart is now disabled and the pause button is now enabled. The timer is set to setInterval. I've got a function inside here which is just going to increment the output by 1 every single time, and then it's going to divide that by 100 just so we can get the milliseconds, and then that's going to inject that into the timer div we have set here. Below this we've got the pause button that we've referenced here. We're going to add an event listen to it. Let's go and click, and that's going to trigger the pause timer function, and the same for the restart is going to trigger the start timer function. And just to start off, we've got the pause button disabled because at the moment obviously the function is not running. So if we refresh this now and we click restart, we can see that the number's incrementing. If we click pause, that now stops, and that's actually paused the setInterval. And we can click restart again, and that restarts the setInterval. And we can pause that and restart, and pause and restart. You'll notice I've got a set timer here that's actually commented out. If we uncomment this and click save and refresh, the script is run on load, and you can see the restart button is disabled and the pause button's enabled. So if we didn't have these in here, I'll show you what happens if we don't trigger these Boolean values here to disable and enable the buttons. So if we now restart this, both buttons are enabled. I can pause it and I can restart it. It's absolutely fine. But the issue comes in is when I hit the restart button again, this number now goes twice as fast. That's because we're now running 2 timers at the same time, and they're both incrementing the output. So now that's doubled in time. We can keep hitting this, and you can see this number just gets faster and faster. So it's always good just to have that fallback in there where we don't allow the client or the user to actually click those buttons. So if we refresh that now, we can see it's back to normal, and we can just repeat this. If you found this video useful, click this video above to learn more about JavaScript.